The blizzard hit Denver with the fury of something personal, something vengeful. By 7 in the evening, the city had transformed into a ghost town wrapped in white. Streets that usually hummed with rush-hour traffic now lay silent beneath 2 feet of snow that continued falling like divine judgment. The wind howled through downtown corridors, rattling windows in their frames, testing the strength of everything it touched. Marcus Webb stood at the window of his 3rd-floor apartment, watching the storm swallow the world outside. His daughter Riley pressed against his leg, her small hand gripping his jeans with the particular intensity of a 6-year-old who sensed something was wrong but couldn't name it. "Daddy, is the snow angry?" Riley asked, her voice small. Marcus looked down at her, at the gap where her front tooth used to be, at the constellation of freckles across her nose that reminded him so much of her mother it sometimes hurt to breathe. He knelt to her level, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. "No, sweetheart, snow isn't angry. It's just doing what snow does in winter, being big and loud and making sure everyone stays home where it's warm." "Like you make me stay inside when I have a cold?" Marcus smiled despite the worry gnawing at his chest. "Exactly like that." The radiator in the corner clanked and hissed, pushing out heat that barely reached the window where they stood. Their apartment was small, a 2-bedroom in a building that had seen better decades, but it was theirs. The rent was manageable on his salary as an EMT, and the landlord didn't ask questions about single fathers with irregular schedules and a kid who sometimes got loud during cartoons. Riley wandered back to the living room where her coloring books were spread across the coffee table like a paper garden. Marcus returned his attention to the storm, his trained eye cataloging the danger, visibility near 0, temperature dropping fast, wind gusts strong enough to knock a grown man off his feet. This was the kind of weather that killed people who made bad decisions, who thought they could beat nature through sheer, stubborn will. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Work, he knew before he even looked. The text from dispatch was brief and urgent. All available units report multiple weather-related emergencies, warming shelters, overwhelmed. Need everyone. Marcus closed his eyes and exhaled slowly. He'd known this was coming the moment the forecast changed that morning. Blizzards brought out the worst and the best in a city. People stranded in cars, homeless folks caught outside, heart attacks from shoveling snow, fires from space heaters, carbon monoxide poisoning from running generators indoors. The list was endless and predictable. He texted back, "Have 6-year-old daughter. No childcare available in this weather." The response came within seconds. "Understood. Stay safe. We'll manage." But Marcus knew they wouldn't manage. Not really. There would be someone out there tonight who wouldn't make it because he'd chosen to stay home. Someone's father or mother or child who would die because he was one body short on the ambulance roster. The weight of it settled on his shoulders like the snow outside, heavy and cold. Riley looked up from her coloring, purple crayon in hand. "Daddy, you have the worry face." Marcus forced his features to soften. "Just thinking about work, baby girl." "Do people need help because of the snow?" "Yeah, they do." Riley set down her crayon with the deliberate care of someone making an important decision. She walked over to him, her bare feet silent on the worn carpet, and took his hand in both of hers. "You should go help them," she said simply, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "I can't leave you alone, Riley. Not in weather like this. Mrs. Chen is downstairs. She always says I can come over any time." Mrs. Chen was their elderly neighbor, a widow who smelled like jasmine tea and mothballs, and who'd appointed herself Riley's unofficial grandmother the day they'd moved in 3 years ago. She was kind and patient and had probably forgotten more about raising children than Marcus would ever know. But asking her to watch Riley during a blizzard, potentially overnight, felt like an imposition too large to make. "Mrs. Chen is 78 years old, sweetheart. That's a lot to ask." Riley's expression took on that stubborn set he recognized all too well, the same look her mother used to get when she'd made up her mind about something and wouldn't be moved. "Mommy would want you to help people," Riley said quietly. The words hit Marcus like a fist to the sternum. Claire had been gone for 2 years, taken by an aneurysm that gave no warning and offered no second chances. One moment she'd been laughing at breakfast, the next she was on the floor, and by the time the ambulance arrived, by the time Marcus had performed CPR on his own wife in their kitchen while Riley screamed from her bedroom, it was already too late. Claire would have wanted him to help. She'd been a nurse, had understood the calling, had never once complained about his irregular hours or the nights he came home smelling like other people's emergencies. If you're drawn into this story and want to see what happens next, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from. I love hearing from you and knowing this story is reaching hearts across the globe. Marcus pulled Riley into a hug, breathing in the apple shampoo scent of her hair. "You're too smart for your own good, you know that? Mrs. Chen says I get it from you." 20 minutes later, Marcus knocked on apartment 2B with Riley's overnight bag slung over his shoulder. Mrs. Chen opened the door, her face creased with concern that immediately shifted to understanding when she saw them. "The storm has called you to work," she said. It wasn't a question. "I wouldn't ask if—" Mrs. Chen held up a hand, silencing him. "Marcus Webb, you are a good father and a good man. Riley is always welcome in my home. You go save lives. We will make dumplings and watch movies and be perfectly fine." Riley hugged Marcus around the waist, squeezing tight. "Be careful, Daddy. Come home safe. Always do, baby girl. Always do." The lie tasted bitter on his tongue. He couldn't promise safety, not in his line of work, not on a night like this. But he could promise to try, to be smart, to come back to her if the universe allowed it. The cold hit him like a wall the moment he stepped outside. The wind drove snow into his face with stinging force, and within seconds his cheeks were numb. His truck, a 10-year-old Ford that had seen him through countless Colorado winters, sat buried beneath a white mound in the parking lot. He spent 15 minutes digging it out, his fingers aching inside his gloves before the engine finally turned over with a reluctant growl. The drive to the station took 3 times longer than usual. The streets were nearly impassable, buried beneath snow that the plows couldn't keep up with. Twice Marcus had to help push other vehicles out of drifts. By the time he reached the firehouse that housed the ambulance bay, his entire body was shaking with cold and exertion. Inside, the organized chaos of emergency response greeted him. Paramedics moved with purpose between ambulances, checking equipment, restocking supplies. The dispatch radio crackled constantly with new calls, a relentless stream of need that never seemed to pause for breath. "Webb, thank God!" His supervisor, Captain Sarah Reeves, appeared from the equipment room, her salt and pepper hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face lined with the particular exhaustion that came from making impossible decisions. "I know you have Riley. Mrs. Chen is watching her. I'm here. Put me to work." Sarah's relief was visible. "Ambulance 3, partner up with Jenkins. We've got a possible hypothermia case near Civic Center Park. Homeless man, unconscious. Police are on scene trying to keep him stable." Marcus nodded, already moving toward his locker to gear up. The familiar routine steadied him. Thermal layers, waterproof pants, heavy coat with reflective strips, boots with good tread, gloves that allowed dexterity while retaining warmth. Every piece of equipment was armor against the night ahead. Jenkins was young, maybe 25, with the eager intensity of someone who still believed he could save everyone. They'd worked together before, had developed the wordless communication that good partners share. Jenkins drove while Marcus reviewed the call details on the computer mounted between the seats. The journey to Civic Center Park was treacherous. Even with chains on the tires, the ambulance slid through intersections, fishtailing on ice hidden beneath the snow. The city had transformed into something alien and hostile. Familiar landmarks rendered unrecognizable by the storm's white fury. They found the homeless man exactly where dispatch said he'd be, huddled against the base of a monument surrounded by police officers trying to shield him from the wind with their bodies. Marcus and Jenkins moved quickly, efficiently, years of training guiding their hands. Core temperature dangerously low, breathing shallow, pulse thready. They wrapped him in thermal blankets, started an IV of warm saline, loaded him into the ambulance with practiced care. "Denver General," Marcus called to Jenkins as they pulled away from the scene. "Fastest route, but don't kill us getting there." The radio crackled to life before Jenkins could respond. "All units, we have a priority call. Vehicle off the road near Red Rock's Canyon entrance. Multiple occupants, including children. Possible entrapment." Marcus's blood went cold. Red Rocks was 20 minutes outside the city in good weather. In this storm, it might as well be on the moon. "Ambulance 3 responding," he heard himself say. They dropped the homeless man at Denver General's emergency entrance, where the staff was already overwhelmed with weather-related casualties. No time for paperwork, no time for anything but the barest exchange of information before they were back in the storm, heading west toward the mountains where the real danger lived. The drive became a nightmare of white-knuckle concentration. Jenkins gripped the wheel with both hands, leaning forward as if he could see better through sheer force of will. Marcus watched the GPS, calling out directions, noting how far they were from civilization should something go wrong. The landscape grew wilder as they climbed. The flat plains gave way to foothills, then to the dramatic red rock formations that gave the area its name. Beautiful in summer, deadly in winter. The road narrowed, winding through terrain that offered no forgiveness for mistakes. "There," Jenkins said, pointing. Marcus saw it, tire tracks leaving the road, disappearing over an embankment. No vehicle visible from their position. His stomach dropped. They parked the ambulance as close as they dared, activating every emergency light to mark their position. The wind here was even worse, howling through the rocks with a sound like screaming. Marcus grabbed the medical bag and trauma kit, while Jenkins secured a rope line to the ambulance. "Stay in radio contact," Marcus shouted over the wind. "If anything happens." "I know the protocol. Be careful." Marcus started down the embankment, following the tire tracks. The slope was steep, treacherous with ice beneath the snow. He moved carefully, testing each foothold, the rope secured around his waist, the only thing preventing a deadly fall. 20 feet down, he found the vehicle, a luxury SUV, black, expensive, lying on its side against a cluster of boulders. The front end was crumpled, the windshield a spiderweb of cracks. Steam rose from the engine, creating ghostly shapes in the falling snow. Marcus approached carefully, his training cataloging details. Deployment of airbags, significant front-end damage, driver's side door crushed against rock, passenger side accessible but elevated. "Hello?" he called out. "Denver Fire Rescue, can anyone hear me?" Silence, just the wind and his own breathing, rapid with adrenaline. He climbed onto the side of the vehicle, now the top, and peered through the passenger window. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness inside, revealing a nightmare. A woman in the driver's seat, unconscious, blood on her face. Expensive clothes, designer coat. Late 30s maybe. Blonde hair matted with blood. And in the back seat, a child. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, conscious, eyes wide with terror. She was strapped into a booster seat, which had probably saved her life. When she saw Marcus, her mouth opened, and the words that came out made his heart stop. "Sir, can you save my mommy?" The voice, high and desperate and so achingly familiar, it transported Marcus back 2 years, to Riley screaming in the hallway while he tried to bring her mother back from the dead. "I'm here to help," Marcus managed, his voice rough. "What's your name?" "Sophie. My mommy won't wake up. I've been calling her, but she won't wake up." Marcus forced himself into professional mode, pushing emotion aside with practiced discipline. "Sophie, I'm Marcus. I'm a paramedic. I'm going to get you and your mommy out of here, okay? But I need you to be very brave for me." "I'm trying to be brave," Sophie said, and her voice cracked. "But I'm scared, and it's so cold." "I know, sweetheart, I know." Marcus keyed his radio. "Jenkins, I've got 2 patients. 1 adult female, unconscious, significant head trauma. 1 pediatric, conscious and alert. Vehicle on its side, difficult extraction. I need fire rescue with extrication equipment and a second ambulance, now." Jenkins's response was immediate. "Roger that. Dispatch, did you copy?" "Affirmative. Ambulance 3. Fire rescue dispatched. ETA 30 minutes given weather conditions." 30 minutes. A lifetime in an emergency. A death sentence in this cold. Marcus made a decision. "I'm going in. Someone has to stabilize them until help arrives." He pried open the passenger door, now above his head, and carefully lowered himself into the vehicle. The interior was a disaster of broken glass and deployed airbags. The woman, Sophie's mother, was pinned by the crushed driver's side, her breathing shallow and labored. Marcus checked her pulse, weak but present. He touched her face gently, assessing the head wound. Significant, but the bleeding had slowed. Possible skull fracture, possible internal injuries, impossible to know without proper equipment. "Mommy," Sophie whimpered from the back seat. Marcus squeezed between the seats to check on the girl. She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. He did a quick assessment, no visible injuries, pupils equal and reactive. Neck and spine appeared stable. "Sophie, you did such a good job staying in your seat. That kept you safe. Now I need to check on your mom, okay? But I'm right here. I'm not leaving either of you." He returned his attention to the mother, starting with the basics. Airway clear, breathing labored but adequate, circulation compromised. He pulled thermal blankets from his bag, tucking them around both patients. The cold was the immediate enemy, hypothermia, a real threat. The woman's purse had spilled across the center console. Among the scattered contents, Marcus saw a wallet, designer, monogrammed. He picked it up, flipping it open. Victoria Ashford, the name registered somewhere in his consciousness. He'd seen it in the news. In headlines he'd scrolled past while waiting for Riley at school pickup. Victoria Ashford, CEO of some tech company. Young, brilliant, ruthless, according to the business press. Self-made billionaire who'd started with nothing and built an empire. Looking at her now, unconscious and bleeding in a wrecked vehicle, she looked like any other mother. Vulnerable. Human. Mortal. "Is my mommy going to die?" Sophie asked, her voice small. Marcus turned to look at the girl. In the beam of his flashlight he could see her clearly. Dark hair like her mother's, eyes that same distinctive blue-gray, face pale with cold and fear. "Your mommy is very hurt," Marcus said, because he never lied to children. "But I'm here and more help is coming. We're going to do everything we can for her." "She has to be okay," Sophie said, and there was something in her voice beyond fear. Desperation, knowledge of what it meant to lose a mother. "She's all I have. It's just us, just me and mommy." Just like it's just me and Riley, Marcus thought. He moved back to Victoria, working quickly to stabilize her as best he could in the confined space. He placed a cervical collar around her neck, started an IV, covered her with additional thermal blankets. All the while he talked to Sophie, keeping her engaged, keeping her focused on something other than the terror of their situation. "Where were you going tonight, Sophie?" "Home. We were at a dinner thing. Mommy said it was important for work. It was boring. But then she said we could get ice cream on the way home even though it's winter and snowing." A sob caught in Sophie's throat. "She always gets me ice cream when I'm good at boring work things." Marcus felt something crack in his chest. This woman, this billionaire CEO, taking her daughter for ice cream after a work event. A small kindness, a promise kept. The kind of thing Claire used to do with Riley. The radio crackled. "Ambulance 3, this is dispatch. Fire rescue is encountering difficulty reaching your location. Road conditions deteriorating. ETA now 45 minutes to an hour." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. An hour. Victoria might not have an hour. "Copy that," he said into the radio, keeping his voice calm for Sophie's sake. "Standing by." The wind howled, shaking the vehicle. Snow continued to fall, building up on the windshield, slowly burying them in white. Marcus worked methodically, checking Victoria's vitals every few minutes, adjusting her position as much as he dared, monitoring for any sign of deterioration. Sophie sang softly to herself in the back seat, nursery rhymes and songs from movies, anything to fill the terrible silence. Marcus recognized some of them, Riley's favorites. "You're very brave, Sophie," he said. "Your mom would be proud of you." "Are you a daddy?" Sophie asked suddenly. The question caught Marcus off guard. "Yes, I have a daughter about your age. Her name is Riley." "Is she scared right now because you're not home?" "Maybe a little, but she's with a good friend who's taking care of her, just like I'm taking care of you and your mommy." "When your little girl is scared, what do you tell her?" Marcus thought about all the nights Riley had woken from nightmares about her mother, all the times he'd held her while she cried, all the promises he'd made that everything would be okay, even when he didn't know if it was true. "I tell her that being scared is okay, that brave people aren't people who don't feel afraid. Brave people are people who feel afraid and do the hard thing anyway." Sophie considered this, her small face serious in the flashlight beam. "Okay, then I'm going to be brave like that." 30 minutes passed. 40. Victoria's breathing grew more labored, her pulse weaker. Marcus made the calculations, every paramedic dreads. How much time did they have? How far could he push? When did the risk of moving her outweigh the risk of leaving her here? Then Victoria's eyes fluttered open. She was disoriented, confused, trying to move and crying out in pain. Marcus gently restrained her, his hands firm but careful. "Victoria, my name is Marcus Webb. I'm a paramedic. You've been in a car accident. You need to stay still." Her eyes found him, unfocused, struggling to understand. "Sophie," she gasped. "My daughter." "I'm here, Mommy," Sophie called from the back seat. "I'm okay." Victoria tried to turn her head toward her daughter's voice, but the cervical collar prevented it. Tears spilled down her cheeks, mixing with the blood. "Don't move." "Her," Marcus said urgently. "Please, Victoria, you have serious injuries. Any movement could make them worse." "My baby, I need to see my baby." The desperation in her voice was primal, maternal, beyond reason. Marcus understood it completely. If their positions were reversed, if it were Riley in that back seat and he couldn't see her, couldn't touch her, he would tear the world apart. "Sophie is safe," Marcus said, his voice gentle but firm. "She's uninjured, but she needs you to stay calm and stay still so I can help you. Can you do that for her?" Victoria's eyes met his, and in them Marcus saw intelligence, fighting through pain and fear. She was assessing him, judging whether to trust him with the most precious thing in her world. "Please," she whispered, "don't let anything happen to her." "I won't, I promise." The words were out before Marcus could stop them. Another promise he might not be able to keep. Another child who might lose a parent despite his best efforts. Victoria's eyes drifted closed again, consciousness slipping away. Marcus checked her vitals. Dropping. He was losing her. "Jenkins," he called into the radio. "We're out of time. How far out is rescue?" 20 minutes. They're coming as fast as they can." 20 minutes. It might as well be 20 hours. Marcus looked at Sophie, at Victoria, at the impossible situation he found himself in, and he made a decision that violated every protocol, every safety regulation, every lesson he'd learned in 15 years as a paramedic. He was going to move them. Marcus stands at a crossroads, follow protocol and wait for backup, while Victoria's condition deteriorates, or risk everything to move them himself. Meanwhile, the blizzard rages on, and somewhere in the city, Riley waits for her father to come home safe, just like Sophie needs her mother to survive this night. If you're hooked on this story and need to know what happens next, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an upload. Your support means everything and helps me bring you more emotional stories like this one. What would you do in Marcus's position? Let me know in the comments below. The decision crystallized in Marcus's mind with terrible clarity. Victoria was dying. Not in the dramatic, sudden way that lay people imagined, but in the slow, inexorable way that every paramedic learned to recognize. Her blood pressure dropping degree by degree, her breathing becoming shallower with each minute, her body shutting down systems to protect the core, a biological triage that would ultimately fail. 20 minutes might as well be 20 years. "Sophie," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady, "I need you to listen to me very carefully. I'm going to get you out first, then your mom. Can you be brave a little longer?" "I can be brave," Sophie whispered. Marcus keyed his radio. "Jenkins, I'm bringing them up. I need you ready to receive patients." There was a pause. When Jenkins spoke, his voice was tight with concern. "Marcus, you can't move a trauma patient with possible spinal injuries. You know the protocols. Protocols don't account for a patient who won't survive waiting for proper equipment. I'm making the call. Captain Reeves is going to have your head for this. She can have it after I save these two." Marcus disconnected before Jenkins could argue further. He turned to Sophie, forcing a smile he didn't feel. "Okay, sweetheart, I'm going to unbuckle you and lift you out. You might be a little sore, but I'll be gentle. Ready?" Sophie nodded, her small face set with determination that reminded Marcus achingly of Riley. He moved carefully, checking her again for injuries he might have missed. Nothing. The booster seat had done its job, and the vehicle's position had spared the back seat from the worst of the impact. He unbuckled her slowly, talking her through each movement, then lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, all fragile bones and trust. "Close your eyes," he told her as he maneuvered them through the passenger door. "It's going to be cold and windy out there, but I've got you." Sophie buried her face against his shoulder as Marcus climbed out of the vehicle. The wind hit them immediately, a physical force that nearly knocked him off his feet. The rope around his waist was the only thing anchoring them to safety. He could barely see through the driving snow, each step up the embankment a gamble against ice and exhaustion. His muscles screamed, his lungs burned, but he kept moving, one foot in front of the other, because Sophie needed him to be strong, needed him to be the hero her mother couldn't be. Right now. Jenkins was there at the top, reaching down to take Sophie from Marcus's arms. "I've got her. Ambulance is warm and running. Go get the mother." Marcus didn't waste breath on words. He turned and started back down the slope, his legs shaking with fatigue. The descent that had taken him 5 minutes the first time now felt endless. Each step was measured, careful, because falling now would mean 2 deaths instead of 1. Back in the vehicle, Victoria's condition had worsened. Her lips had taken on a blue tinge, her breathing barely visible. Marcus worked quickly, assessing the situation with the cold clarity that came from years of emergency medicine. Moving her was going to hurt her, might kill her. The crushed driver's side meant potential internal injuries, possible spinal damage, a dozen complications that proper equipment and a full trauma team were meant to handle. But staying here would definitely kill her, lesser of two evils, the calculus of emergency medicine. "Victoria," Marcus said, though he wasn't sure she could hear him. "I'm going to get you out of here. I'm going to try not to hurt you, but I need you to know. I'm doing this to save your life. Sophie needs you. Do you understand?" No response, just the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Marcus positioned himself carefully. He would need to slide her from the crushed driver's side toward the passenger side, keeping her as immobile as possible while navigating the wreckage. The cervical collar was already in place. He had no backboard, no proper restraints, nothing but his hands and his training and a prayer to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. He began to move her. Victoria screamed. The sound cut through the wind, primal and terrible. She thrashed against his grip, fighting him with the desperate strength of someone in agony. Marcus held firm, his voice urgent and commanding. "Victoria, stop! You have to stay still. I know it hurts, I know, but you have to let me help you." Her eyes opened, unfocused, wild with pain. Sophie is safe. She's in the ambulance, warm and waiting for you. But I need you to stay still so I can get you to her. Please, Victoria, trust me." Something in his voice must have reached her through the pain. She went still, tears streaming down her face, her breath coming in short gasps. Marcus continued moving her, every second an eternity, every inch of movement a potential catastrophe. Finally, mercifully, he had her positioned near the passenger side. Now came the hardest part, getting her up through the elevated door and out into the storm. He keyed his radio with shaking hands. "Jenkins, I need you at the vehicle. I can't lift her out alone." "On my way." Marcus held Victoria stable, monitoring her breathing, watching for any sign that he'd caused catastrophic damage. Her pulse was thready but present, her breathing labored but continuous. She was still alive. For now. Jenkins appeared at the passenger door, his young face pale with cold and concern. Together they lifted Victoria with agonizing care, Marcus supporting her head and neck, Jenkins taking her legs. The wind fought them every inch of the way, trying to tear her from their grip. Snow blinded them. The rope line was their only guide. The climb up the embankment was a nightmare. Marcus's legs trembled with exhaustion. His arms burned. Victoria moaned with each jarring step, sounds that would haunt him in whatever sleep he managed tonight. But they kept moving, kept climbing, because stopping meant dying, and neither of them was ready to let that happen. They reached the top. The ambulance waited, doors open, interior lights blazing like a beacon. Sophie's face appeared in the window, her eyes wide with hope and fear. They loaded Victoria into the ambulance with practiced efficiency, securing her to the gurney, covering her with warming blankets, starting a second IV. Marcus checked her vitals with hands that wanted to shake but held steady through sheer force of will. "Vital signs?" Jenkins asked, already behind the wheel. "BP 80/50 and dropping. Pulse 120. Respiration shallow at 22. Possible internal bleeding. Head trauma. Unknown spinal injuries. We need to move. Now." The ambulance lurched forward, tires fighting for purchase, on the snow-covered road. Marcus braced himself against the interior, continuing to work on Victoria even as the vehicle swayed and slid. Sophie sat in the jump seat, belted in, her eyes never leaving her mother's face. "Is she going to be okay?" Sophie asked, her voice small. Marcus wanted to lie, wanted to tell her yes, everything would be fine, Her mother would wake up and take her for that promised ice cream. But he'd never lied to a child about medical realities, and he wouldn't start now. I don't know, Sophie, she's very sick, but we're doing everything we can, and we're taking her to the best hospital in Denver. They have doctors and equipment that can help her in ways I can't. Can I hold her hand? Marcus looked at the little girl, at the desperation in her face, and made another decision that violated protocol. Yes, but be gentle, don't pull or squeeze. Sophie unbuckled herself and moved carefully to her mother's side. She took Victoria's hand in both of hers, so small against her mother's pale fingers, and she began to talk, a steady stream of words that made Marcus's throat tight. Mommy, it's Sophie, I'm here. The nice man saved us. His name is Marcus, and he has a daughter like me named Riley. You're going to be okay because you have to be okay. Remember, you promised we'd go to the zoo next weekend, and you said we could see the new baby elephant. You can't break your promise, Mommy. You never break your promises. Victoria's eyes fluttered open. She looked at her daughter, and something shifted in her expression. Recognition, love, fear. Her lips moved, barely a whisper. Sophie, my baby. I'm here, Mommy. I'm okay. But you have to be okay too. Victoria's gaze shifted to Marcus. In her eyes he saw a question, a plea, a mother's desperate hope that the stranger holding her life in his hands could perform a miracle. Denver General. 10 minutes out, Jenkins called from the front. They're prepping Trauma Bay 2. 10 minutes. Marcus checked Victoria's vitals again. Blood pressure still dropping. The internal bleeding was winning. She needed surgery, needed it now, needed things he couldn't provide in the back of a moving ambulance. Victoria, Marcus said, leaning close, stay with us. Stay with Sophie. She needs you. Fight. Trying, Victoria breathed. So tired. I know, but you're strong. I can see it. You built a company from nothing. You raised Sophie alone. You're a fighter. So fight now. Fight for her. The ambulance swerved, and Marcus grabbed the overhead rail to steady himself. Through the front windshield, he could see the lights of Denver General growing closer, a constellation of hope in the storm. Come on, he muttered. Come on, stay with us. Victoria's eyes began to close. Her breathing grew shallower. Sophie squeezed her mother's hand, tears streaming down her face. Mommy, please don't go. Please don't leave me. I don't know how to be alone. Please, Mommy. The words hit Marcus like bullets. He'd heard them before in his own kitchen 2 years ago from Riley's mouth as she stood in the doorway, watching him try to save her mother. The same desperation, the same impossible plea for the universe to reverse its course. Sophie, Marcus said gently, talk to her. Tell her about something happy. Something you did together. Sophie nodded, wiping her eyes. Remember last summer, Mommy, when we went to the beach, and you built the biggest sandcastle, and I said it looked like a palace, and you said it was a palace for a princess named Sophie. She was sobbing now, but still talking. And we found those pretty shells. You said we'd make them into a necklace. We never did make that necklace, Mommy. You have to wake up so we can make it. The ambulance pulled into the emergency bay. The doors flew open, and a trauma team in scrubs descended like an organized swarm. Marcus gave his report in the clipped, efficient language of emergency medicine, conveying everything they needed to know in 30 seconds. They wheeled Victoria away at a run, Marcus jogging alongside, still monitoring, still fighting. Sophie tried to follow, but a nurse gently held her back. Sweetie, you can't go in there, but we'll take good care of your mom, I promise. No, Sophie screamed. Mommy, don't leave me. The trauma bay doors swung closed, cutting off Sophie's cries. Marcus stood on the other side, his hands still gloved, his jacket still covered in Victoria's blood. Through the small window, he could see the organized chaos of a trauma team at work. Scalpels and sutures, blood and monitors, desperate measures to save a life that was slipping away. He turned and walked back to the waiting area where Sophie sat huddled in a chair, a blanket around her shoulders, her face buried in her hands. Jenkins stood nearby, looking helpless. Marcus knelt in front of Sophie. "Hey, look at me." Sophie raised her head, her eyes red and swollen. "Your mom is with the best doctors in Colorado right now. They're doing everything possible to help her, but it's going to take time, hours maybe. You're going to have to be brave for a little longer." "I don't want to be brave anymore," Sophie whispered. "I want my mommy." I know you do." A social worker appeared, clipboard in hand, professional sympathy on her face. "Is there anyone we can call? Family, a father?" Sophie shook her head. "It's just us, just me and Mommy." The social worker looked at Marcus. "We'll need to place her in emergency foster care until—" "No." The word came out harder than Marcus intended. "She's been through enough tonight. She's staying with me." "Sir, we have protocols." "I'm aware of the protocols. I'm also aware that shuffling a traumatized 8-year-old through the system at midnight during a blizzard is cruel and unnecessary. She knows me. She trusts me. She's staying with me until her mother wakes up or until other arrangements can be made." The social worker opened her mouth to argue, but something in Marcus's expression stopped her. She sighed. "I'll need your information, full name, address, employment, and you'll need to stay at the hospital where we can reach you." "Fine, whatever you need." Marcus filled out the paperwork with hands that finally allowed themselves to shake. Jenkins brought coffee that neither of them wanted, but both drank anyway. Sophie sat silent, staring at the trauma bay doors, as if she could will them to open and reveal her mother, healed and whole. 2 hours passed. 3. The waiting room filled and emptied with the usual cast of emergency department characters. A man with a broken arm, a woman with chest pains, a teenager with a laceration that needed stitches. The blizzard continued to dump snow on the city, visible through the windows, indifferent to human suffering. Marcus checked his phone. 4 missed calls from Mrs. Chen. He stepped outside the waiting room to call her back. "Marcus, thank goodness. Riley was worried when you didn't call. Is everything all right?" "Long story, Mrs. Chen. I'm fine, but I'm going to be at the hospital for a while. There was a complicated rescue. Can Riley stay with you a bit longer?" Of course. She's already asleep on my couch. Take all the time you need." Marcus returned to find Sophie exactly where he'd left her, still staring at those doors. He sat beside her, and without a word, she leaned against him, seeking the comfort of another human being in a world that had suddenly become terrifying and uncertain. "My daddy died when I was little," Sophie said quietly. "I don't remember him much. Just pictures Mommy shows me. She says he was a good man, that he would have loved me." "I'm sure he would have," Marcus said. "Mommy works a lot. Everyone says she's really important, that she runs a big company. But she always makes time for me. Every night, even when she's tired, she reads me a story. She does all the voices. It's silly, but I love it." "That's not silly. That's what good moms do." "Is your wife a good mom?" The question caught Marcus off guard. "She was. She died 2 years ago." Sophie looked up at him, her eyes wide. "So you know what it's like?" "Yeah, kiddo, I know what it's like." They sat in silence, 2 souls bonded by loss and fear, waiting for news that might shatter or save what remained of their worlds. The trauma bay doors finally opened. A surgeon emerged, still in scrubs, his face unreadable. Marcus stood, his heart pounding. Sophie gripped his hand so tightly he could feel his bones shift. The surgeon looked at them, and his expression softened slightly. "Are you family?" "I'm the paramedic who brought her in. This is her daughter, Sophie." The surgeon knelt to Sophie's level. "Your mom is very sick, but she's alive. We had to do surgery to stop the bleeding inside her belly. She's going to be in the ICU for a while, and she's not awake yet, but she made it through the surgery, which is a very good sign. Can I see her? Sophie asked. Not yet, maybe in the morning. Right now she needs to rest, and so do you. Sophie's face crumpled. But I want to see her. I want to tell her I'm okay. The surgeon looked at Marcus, a silent question. Marcus nodded. 5 minutes, that's all I'm asking. The surgeon hesitated, then sighed. 5 minutes, but she can't touch anything and she has to be very quiet. They followed him through the trauma bay, past the curtained areas where other patients fought their own battles, into the ICU. Victoria lay in a bed surrounded by machines, tubes, and wires, connecting her to monitors that beeped and hummed. She looked small, vulnerable, nothing like the powerful CEO from the news articles. Sophie approached slowly, her eyes wide. Mommy? No response, just the steady rhythm of the ventilator, breathing for Victoria while her body worked to heal. She can't hear you right now, the surgeon said gently, but you can talk to her anyway. Sometimes it helps. Sophie moved closer, standing on tiptoe to see her mother's face. Mommy, it's Sophie. The doctor says you're going to be okay. I'm going to be brave like you taught me. And when you wake up, we're going to make that shell necklace. And we're going to go see the baby elephant. And we're going to do all the things you promised. So you have to wake up, okay? You have to. Marcus watched, his vision blurring with tears he refused to shed. This wasn't his grief to claim. His loss had already happened. But he could witness Sophie's fear, could stand beside her in this moment, could be the steady presence she needed. Time's up, the surgeon said. You need to let her rest now. Sophie leaned forward and placed a gentle kiss on her mother's forehead. I love you, Mommy. Please come back to me. They left the ICU, Sophie's hand still gripping Marcus's. The social worker was waiting in the hallway, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Webb, I've arranged temporary foster placement. No, Sophie said, her voice small but firm. I want to stay with Marcus, please. He saved us. He understands. The social worker looked at Marcus. This is highly irregular. Everything about tonight has been irregular, Marcus replied. She's been through a traumatic experience. She knows me, trusts me. Separating her from the only familiar person she has right now would be cruel. I'll need you to sign additional paperwork. And there will be follow-up. Home visits, background checks. Fine, whatever it takes. More paperwork, more signatures, more bureaucratic measures to satisfy a system designed to protect children, but sometimes forgetting to account for human connection and trust. By the time everything was sorted, it was past 3 in the morning. The blizzard had finally begun to ease, though snow still fell in lazy spirals outside the windows. Jenkins had long since gone back to work, taking Ambulance 3 to answer other calls, other emergencies. The world didn't stop spinning because Victoria Ashford was fighting for her life. Marcus led Sophie out to his truck, helping her climb into the passenger seat. She was exhausted, running on adrenaline and fear. She fell asleep before they'd even left the parking lot, her head leaning against the window, her breath fogging the glass. The drive back to his apartment was slow and careful. The streets were empty now, the city finally surrendered to the storm. Marcus's mind was numb with exhaustion, but his hands stayed steady on the wheel. He had precious cargo to deliver safely. Mrs. Chen met them at the door, her face creased with concern. Riley stood behind her, sleepy-eyed and worried. Daddy! Riley launched herself at Marcus, hugging him around the waist. Hey, baby girl, I'm okay. Everything's okay. Who's that? Riley asked, looking at Sophie. This is Sophie. She's going to stay with us for a little while. Her mom is in the hospital. Riley's expression shifted to something older than her years, understanding born of her own loss. Oh, does she need a friend? Yeah, Riley, I think she does. Riley walked over to Sophie and took her hand. "My mommy died, but my daddy's really nice. He'll take care of you." Sophie looked down at this smaller child, offering comfort, and something in her expression cracked. She began to cry, not the quiet tears from before, but deep sobs that shook her entire body. Riley hugged her, and Marcus scooped them both up, carrying them to his apartment, while Mrs. Chen followed with blankets and the wisdom of someone who'd seen enough of life to know when words were useless. They made a nest on the living room floor, blankets and pillows and two little girls who'd both known loss in different measures. Marcus sat between them, and they talked about mothers and hospitals and fear and hope. Riley shared her favorite stuffed animal, a threadbare rabbit named Mr. Flops. Sophie held it like a lifeline. Eventually, exhaustion won. Both girls fell asleep. Riley curled against Marcus's side, Sophie on his other side, their breathing falling into sync. Mrs. Chen covered them all with another blanket before letting herself out quietly, her eyes wet with tears she didn't bother to hide. Marcus sat in the darkness, too tired to move, too wired to sleep. His mind replayed the night, the embankment, the crash, Victoria's blood on his hands, Sophie's desperate plea to save her mother. He'd made decisions that violated every protocol, taken risks that could have ended in disaster, but Victoria was alive. Sophie was safe. For tonight, that was enough. His phone buzzed, a text from the hospital. Victoria Ashford stable, condition upgraded to serious, prognosis guarded but improving. Marcus closed his eyes and let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. Alive, fighting, the universe had granted a reprieve, given him and Sophie a second chance. He looked down at the two girls sleeping against him, orphaned and half-orphaned, connected by loss and luck and the random chance of one terrible night. And he made a silent promise to Claire, to Victoria, to himself. He would protect them both. Whatever came next, whatever battles lay ahead, these children would not face them alone. The storm outside finally stopped. In the morning, the city would wake to a world transformed by snow, white and clean and new. But for now, in this moment, three souls found peace in the simple act of being together, of surviving another night, of holding on to hope when hope was all they had left. Morning light filtered through the apartment windows, weak and watery. Marcus woke to the smell of jasmine tea and the sound of soft voices. Mrs. Chen had returned, bringing breakfast and the kind of quiet comfort only grandmothers could provide. Riley and Sophie sat at the kitchen table, coloring together. Sophie was showing Riley how to shade clouds, her voice steadier than it had been hours before. The resilience of children never ceased to amaze Marcus. His phone rang. Denver General. "Mr. Webb, this is Dr. Patricia Morrison, ICU attending. Victoria Ashford is awake and asking for her daughter." Marcus's heart leapt. "She's coherent. Remarkably so. Strong woman. She wants to see Sophie immediately." 20 minutes later, they walked through the ICU doors. Sophie's hand trembled in Marcus's grip. Riley had insisted on coming, her 6-year-old wisdom understanding that Sophie needed support. Victoria was sitting up slightly, still connected to monitors, but her eyes were clear. When she saw Sophie, tears spilled down her cheeks. "Baby," she whispered. Sophie ran to her mother's bedside. They held each other, crying, whispering words meant only for each other. Marcus stepped back, giving them privacy, his throat tight with emotion. Victoria looked up at him over Sophie's head. "You saved us, both of us." "Just doing my job," Marcus said. "No." Victoria's voice was firm, despite its weakness. "You risked everything, broke protocols. Jenkins told me. You could lose your certification for what you did." Marcus hadn't thought about consequences. He still didn't regret his choice. Sophie needed her mother. I did what had to be done. Victoria reached out her hand. Marcus took it and she squeezed with surprising strength. Thank you, for my life, for my daughter, for understanding what it means to be a parent willing to do anything. You'd have done the same. Yes, I would have. She looked at Riley, who stood shyly by the door. Is this your daughter? This is Riley. She's beautiful, like her father, brave and kind. Riley walked forward, her gap-toothed smile breaking through. My daddy's the best daddy, and now Sophie can keep her mommy, just like I wish I could have kept mine. The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. Victoria pulled Riley into a gentle hug with her free arm, and Marcus watched as these two children, connected by one terrible night, found something neither had expected: understanding. 3 weeks later, Marcus received a letter. Not email, actual paper, expensive stationery, Victoria's handwriting. Dear Marcus, some debts can never be repaid, but gratitude can be acknowledged. Sophie and I are healing, together. She asks about Riley constantly. Perhaps they could be friends. Perhaps our families, born from tragedy, could find something good. You gave us tomorrow. Let me give you something in return. Certainty that breaking the rules to save a life is never wrong. Forever grateful, Victoria and Sophie. Marcus smiled, folded the letter, and called Riley. Want to invite Sophie to the zoo? I hear there's a baby elephant to see. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you loved this story, check out the other videos on your screen now. I think you'll really enjoy them. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. See you in the next story.